You are about to hear the story of 11,000 paratroopers who were trucked into a frozen town with no winter gear, no ammunition reserves, and no idea what was waiting for them. Bastogne, Belgium, December 944. 7 roads converge on this quiet crossroads town in the Ardennes forest. Every single one of them matters. If the German army wants to reach Antwerp and split the Allied forces in half, its tanks and supply trucks have to pass through Bastogne. There is no way around it. On the 16th of December 944, 3 German armies launch Operation Watch on the Rhine, the last major counter-offensive of the Second World War on the Western Front. 250,000 German soldiers and nearly 1,000 tanks slam into a thinly held section of the American line in the Ardennes. The goal is insane but simple: smash through the forest, cross the Meuse River, capture the port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace. The attack catches the Allies completely off guard. American units along the front are shattered within hours. Thousands of GIs are killed, captured, or sent running west in a disorganized retreat. But the German advance depends on speed, and speed depends on roads, and roads in the Ardennes all lead to one place: Bastogne. On the 17th of December, the 100th Airborne Division receives emergency orders to move out. These men are not fresh. They have just returned from 72 days of brutal combat in the Netherlands during Operation Market Garden. Many are still recovering from wounds. Some are on leave in Paris. The division's commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, is back in Washington for a conference. His deputy, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, takes charge. On the freezing night of December 18th, the paratroopers are loaded into open-air cattle trucks for a 100-mile ride through the darkness. Most of them have no winter coats. Some are wearing Class A dress uniforms because they were pulled straight off leave. They have roughly half the ammunition they would normally carry into a fight. Nobody knows exactly what they are heading into. Private First Class Carmen Gysi later recalled, "We were told the Germans broke through somewhere and we needed to get there before they did. That was it. That was the briefing." The 100th arrives in Bastogne on the morning of December 19th and immediately fans out to set up a defensive perimeter around the town. They are joined by remnants of the 28th Infantry Division and the 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B, battered units that have been fighting a desperate rearguard action to slow the German advance. Together, these forces number roughly 18,000 men. Arrayed against them are elements of 3 German divisions, including the elite Panzerlehr Division and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, supported by heavy armor and artillery. The defenders are outnumbered roughly 5-1 in tanks alone. On December 20th, the German encirclement of Bastogne is complete. The 100th Airborne and its attached units are now surrounded on all sides. No supplies can get in. No wounded can get out. And the weather is about to become its own kind of enemy. Temperatures around Bastogne plunge to nearly -20 degrees Celsius. The ground is frozen so hard that soldiers cannot dig proper foxholes. Men hack at the earth with their helmets and entrenching tools, chipping out shallow depressions barely deep enough to lie in. The lucky ones find abandoned German positions to occupy. The rest huddle together in the open forest, shivering under a single blanket if they have one. Private Darrell Bush of the 500th Parachute Infantry Regiment remembered that his hands and feet were constantly numb. He had no gloves and only one pair of socks. He wore those socks for so long they eventually disintegrated. Frostbite casualties rivaled combat wounds. Men woke up in their foxholes, unable to feel their feet. Some could not walk and had to be dragged to the aid station by their comrades. The medics were overwhelmed and running dangerously low on supplies. Morphine was reserved for the worst cases. Bandages were reused. Plasma ran out within the first 2 days. And while the paratroopers froze in their foxholes, the Germans attacked relentlessly. Probing assaults came from every direction, testing the American perimeter for weak points. German artillery pounded the defensive positions, and the distinctive scream of the Nebelwerfer rocket launcher became a constant companion for the men in the forest. When artillery struck the frozen pine trees, the shells exploded at treetop level, showering the foxholes below with razor-sharp wooden splinters that could kill just as effectively as shrapnel. The men quickly learned to dig their foxholes deeper and cover them with logs, even though every swing of the entrenching tool sent jolts of pain through their frozen hands. But despite the cold, the hunger, and the constant shelling, the paratroopers held. They held because that is what they were trained to do. The 100th Airborne was an elite unit that expected to fight while surrounded. That was quite literally the job description of an airborne soldier. Jump behind enemy lines, hold your ground, and wait for the regular army to catch up. Bastogne was not the first time the Screaming Eagles had been cut off from friendly forces. It was just the worst. On the morning of December 2020, 4 German soldiers approached the American lines under a white flag near the southern edge of the perimeter. 2 officers and 2 enlisted men carried a typewritten message from the German commander, General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz. The note was addressed to the American commander, and it began with the words, "The fortune of war is changing." It went on to describe the hopeless position of the American forces and demanded their honorable surrender within 2 hours. If the Americans refused, the note warned, annihilation by German artillery would follow. The message was delivered to McAuliffe's headquarters, where it was handed to the general, who had been catching a rare few hours of sleep. McAuliffe read the note, and his first reaction was confusion. He thought the Germans were trying to surrender to him. When told it was the other way around, McAuliffe's confusion turned to irritation. He dropped the paper on the floor and muttered, "A surrender? Aw, nuts." He went back to dealing with the 100 other problems demanding his attention. But the German officers at the front line were still waiting for a formal reply. McAuliffe's staff reminded him that he needed to send something back. The general stared at the paper and said, "Well, I do not know what to tell them." His operations officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard, spoke up and said, "What you said initially would be hard to beat." McAuliffe smiled. He took a sheet of paper and wrote a reply that would become one of the most famous messages in American military history. To the German commander. Nuts. The American commander. When the German officers received the note, they were baffled. Colonel Joseph Harper, who delivered the reply, had to explain. If you do not understand what nuts means, in plain English, it is the same as go to hell. The Germans left without another word. McAuliffe's defiance was not mere bravado. He knew that Patton was coming. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr., commanding the Third Army to the south, had already promised Supreme Commander Eisenhower that he would relieve Bastogne within 48 hours. What Patton proposed was considered nearly impossible by conventional military standards. He planned to disengage 3 divisions from their current fight, wheel the entire Third Army 90 degrees to the north, and attack through the German lines to reach Bastogne. In winter, over icy roads, against an enemy that knew he was coming. Military historians still consider this one of the most remarkable feats of logistics and leadership in the entire war. But relief was still days away, and the defenders of Bastogne had to survive long enough to be rescued. On December 23rd, the weather finally broke. The thick overcast that had grounded Allied aircraft for days gave way to clear skies, and within hours the air was filled with the drone of -47 transport planes. Parachutes blossomed over the frozen landscape as the first resupply drops landed inside the perimeter. Ammunition, food, medical supplies, and blankets floated down to cheering soldiers who raced out of their foxholes to retrieve the precious cargo. The supply drops did not solve every problem, but they bought the defenders time. Fighter bombers also appeared overhead, strafing and bombing the German positions that ringed the town. For the first time in days, the men of the 100th had close air support. But the Germans were not finished. On Christmas Eve, the Luftwaffe launched a devastating bombing raid on Bastogne itself. Around 7 in the evening, German bombers dropped magnesium flares over the town, turning night into day. Then the Junkers Ju-88s came in low, dropping bombs and strafing the streets with machine gun fire. One bomb scored a direct hit on the Institut de Notre Dame, a 3-story building being used as a medical aid station. The structure collapsed in a cloud of dust and flames. More than 30 wounded American soldiers were buried alive in the rubble. A Belgian volunteer nurse named Renée Lemaire, who had been tending to the wounded without rest for days, was killed instantly. The men called her the Angel of Bastogne. She was 23 years old. Christmas Day 1944 brought the most determined German assault of the entire siege. 18 German tanks, including several massive Panthers, supported by infantry, attacked the western perimeter near the village of Champs. The fighting was desperate and close quarters. American tank destroyers and bazooka teams engaged the German armor at point-blank range. The battle raged for hours, with the outcome uncertain until the last German tanks were either destroyed or driven back. By the end of Christmas Day, the perimeter still held. Barely. The next day, December 26th, the sound of gunfire to the south grew louder. At 4:45 in the afternoon, tanks from the 4th Armored Division, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, broke through the German lines near the village of Assenois and made contact with the 100 Onist Airborne's perimeter. The siege of Bastogne was over. When Patton's men arrived, there was no Hollywood celebration. The paratroopers were too exhausted, too frozen, and too hungry for cheering. And privately, many of them resented the implication that they had needed rescuing. The 100 Onist Airborne had never considered itself trapped. It considered itself fighting in every direction at once. Years later, when asked why the 100 Onist never acknowledged that Patton had saved them, a veteran of the division gave a simple answer. We did not need rescuing. We were the 100 Onist Airborne. We were exactly where we were supposed to be. The defense of Bastogne cost the 100 Onist Airborne Division 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, and 516 missing between December 19th and January 6th. The division headquarters received the Presidential Unit Citation, the first time in American history that an entire division was so honored. The word Bastogne was embroidered on the division's colors, where it remains to this day. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from General McAuliffe himself. On Christmas Eve, even as German bombs fell on the town, he dictated a message to his troops. What is merry about all this, you ask? We are fighting. It is cold. We are not home. But what has the proud Eagle Division accomplished with its worthy comrades? Just this: we have stopped cold everything that has been thrown at us. We are giving our country and our loved ones at home a worthy Christmas present. And being privileged to take part in this gallant feat of arms, we are truly making for ourselves a Merry Christmas. In our next video, we follow another American military operation that was anything but merry. Operation Just Cause, the 189 invasion of Panama to capture Manuel Noriega, the dictator who went from CIA asset to America's most wanted man overnight.